Well, hello, we are out in the garden and it is now summer, we can say. And by that, I mean it's getting warm, it's getting hot, but it doesn't mean the planting stops for me. I am someone that will plant things year round. You sometimes have to care for them more during the summer because the watering could change, but guess what? Spring, summer, fall, nurseries have flowers in. Sometimes you even find them on sale, which is what I recently did. So I have a little bit of garden bed maintenance I want to do back here in this long perennial bed behind my garden shed. And I want to plant these new phlox I just got. So I don't have a lot of blooms at certain times of the year back here. So what I like about these is I picked up about 5 of them and they're Kapow phlox, K-A-Pow, P-O-W, phlox. What I like is they're slightly shorter than certain phlox. They're more in that like 14 to 16, maybe 20 inch tall and wide. And that's kind of nice because certain garden phlox get really tall, like 36 inches tall. So these will be a little bit nicer for more front of the garden. You can see, yeah, do you see why I like them? It's those beautiful blooms. And what I love about garden phlox, they don't have a strong scent, but if you go up, it has just kind of that beautiful country flower smell. It's nothing too strong, but it's just right. So what I want to do is put these in. Now, it's getting towards the evening, which when it's summer, when it's getting hot, I like to plant things closer to the evening so they can have overnight when it gets cooler to kind of acclimate and be in a full sun area, as opposed to early in the morning and then have a hot day all day. That can be kind of hard on them. Now, these are sitting in the nursery anyway, so there's no difference in planting to me when it gets closer to the summer in the heat or spring in the coolness. The difference is how we care for them and how we're gonna watch them. So I'm looking kind of, as you can see, for dead spots. This end of my perennial bed has a few more because some of the peonies aren't near as large as my other side. So what I wanna do is start thinking what blooms at different times. This time of year, I'm starting to have some betony blooming. If you look down the row, you see the betony blooming. So that's like right here, this beautiful flower, they're starting to come. And I love them. And then we also have some Millennium Allium that just are about to open up too. And they're gonna be right here. Pollinators love them. They're super easy. But what I would like is, you know, kind of something else with a little bit more color. And that's what these phlox are gonna do. They're gonna give me that color. And honestly, it's really no different than any other time I plant something. Now, I do have some drip line put in here, so I have to be, you know, kind of careful of that, make sure I don't puncture it. I just am starting kind of to get into drip line this year. We're just kind of having consistently drier years, it seems like. And so I let my grass go dormant, of course. It goes brown, that's how it is. But my flowers that I plant, obviously I need to keep them looking good and happy. So obviously this is kind of when we get in and we're gonna just start planting and we're gonna start digging. Now this area is not something I mulch too heavily. This is something I put maybe some compost on every other year or something. But the reason I don't mulch it too much is because this is a bed I'm changing a lot. It's perennials. It's things that I really want to be able to change and watch grow as it kind of evolves. So this is one that I try to just really fill up with perennials. And that's what I'm doing because the fuller it is, the less weeds you're going to have. And to me, the less work you're going to have. That's my personal opinion. So I'm always going to start with putting some Biotone right in the hole. You know I love to do that. That's because it just helps those roots get off to a great start. And that's the important part here. So these are ripe and ready, meaning they are beautiful, they are blooming, and I want to get them in while it's nice. This week we kind of have a little bit of a reprieve on some of the weather. It's a little bit cooler than it kind of sometimes is in the summer. And to me, it's a great time to get some of these things in, especially when you find maybe some good deals on them. So this one is not too tight like some of them are. And you know I always talk about if they're really tight, I always just like to go in and kind of just rough them up slightly. This one, I just need to give it a few kind of twists and turns with my hand. And already some of those roots you can tell are just opening up. That's all I need to do. We don't need to be too aggressive with this one because it's not too tight in there. And the reason I do that is because it's gonna accept water better if you do that, but it's also gonna help those roots stimulate to wanna grow outwards. Always start with a well-watered plant when you're gonna plant something because then it will receive water better. Never stick a bone dry plant into the ground. It's a lot harder to get used to watering. So now that I have this in there, I'm just gonna push the ground around it, make sure I fill in with that ground I displaced. And you can see the soil is pretty easy here to work with. And this, to me, what's nice about these is year after year, they'll get kind of a bigger mound and eventually there'll be that nice, 16-inch plus wide mound of just blooms. That's the easy part. They're easy blooms, and that's the fun part. So I have about 4 more of these to plant. Then I have a little bit of peony maintenance I want to do. I just got finished planting another phlox, but here you can see, this is gonna be all over the place. So as I'm going down my perennial bed, I'm always constantly thinking of, what do I need to do? When do I need to do it? So this is a spring blooming allium. It's a bulb planted in the fall. It's different than the millennium allium that are perennials that we plant as plants that I was talking about. These are perennials, these millennium. These are bulbs, and these give you those big, beautiful flowers. Now, this is one, for some reason I found out this spring. I never meant to plant it in the front of the bed, but somehow a tall one ended up in front of the bed that should be in the back of the bed. So this is one of those things where sometimes I do things that aren't ideal, but you can tell it went dormant. All of the leaves have died off of it. The seed heads are coming out and the stems are drying off that you can just pull them out. I'm gonna actually go ahead and dig up this bulb because if you don't do it right now, I forget where it's at and then it's hard for me to remember. So I'm gonna pull these up and you can see right here is the bulb. Look at all these little baby ones off of it. So these, I just need to now replant later on. So a lot of you ask me, what do I do if I wanna move a bulb? This is what you do. You dig it up, like I just did. You're gonna let it now dry off, and I'm gonna put it in a dark place until fall. And so in the fall, whenever I plant my other bulbs, which is usually any time from October to November, I'm gonna take these out. I'm gonna label them right now and remember what they are. They're Mount Everest allium. It's a white allium, which I don't even have back here. I honestly don't know how this ended up here. But then this fall, I'm going to go plant it and it will be just like a new bulb. So it's one of those things where it's not ideal to move bulbs now, but honestly, if like this, when I'm digging in a flower bed and I know I'm gonna forget this because everything will die off and I won't even remember where it's at, you sometimes have to do it when you know where it's at and how it's gonna work. And that's what I'm doing with this. So I'm gonna put them in this container for now. I'm gonna let them just kind of dry off. I'll let them just stay dormant, which is what they're doing. These are now dormant. Their leaves are dead, meaning they're not working on anything other than going dormant. So I'm gonna let them sit dormant, and then this fall, I'm just gonna plant them. So that was a little bit off course, but I'm gonna plant the rest of my phlox. Then we have a little bit of peony work to do. I'm finishing up my last phlox here, kind of tucking it in. Now, I am someone that will always push the boundaries on filling things too much, too close. You know, here's the thing, guys. When you garden at home, you're not gardening for anyone else but yourself. So if you're like me, you just try things out. And yeah, I kind of like to overfill a perennial bed. I like that look of it being really full and lush and big. And that's kind of what I'm going for. Now, what you can see I need to do is a little bit of pruning on my rose. It went through its big first push of blooms, and now it had a whole onslaught of some heavy growth that is not on the trellis, so I'll have to kind of prune on that. But what I really want to work on today are some of the peonies. So all the herbaceous peonies, the tree peonies, the Ito peonies, I love them all. They're all done blooming. And so now they're just these shrubs. And so this is the time of year where I start thinking of a little bit of maintenance on them. Now, peonies don't need a lot of work. You can see this is a really large one here. But what I find is, after they're done blooming, what they do is they keep drying off. These blooms keep drying off. And this takes a lot of energy. And instead of the plant putting all of its energy into these kind of dry and dead heads, and then eventually they try to make these little seed heads, I like to just trim them back. And so what I do is I take where all those spent blooms are, and I go back to the next nice leaf spot. So it's like kind of the leaf Y, I call it. So it's right here. You can see back here is a nice spot where a leaf comes out, and I just give it a nice snip right there, pull that off. And one, this cleans up the look of the plant, which I personally think is really nice. But two, it just helps the plant know to put all of its energy into just itself. Into, you know, it's kind of like us. We need to work on ourselves sometimes. And that's exactly what we're trying to tell this plant is, let's just work on yourself, work on your roots, work on the foliage, but don't work on all of those dead heads. And it just, you know, it's just like we do for annuals, just like we do for certain flowers. This is not going to help them rebloom, but what it's going to do is help them not focus so much energy on all of this production of these. And you can tell instantly what it's doing is cleaning it up. You know, this is something that my mom, my grandma always did. And it really does, it lightens the load for the plant is what I like to think. So it kind of just goes around and gives the plant a little bit of a breather. Doesn't have to work so hard, because I think we tend to forget that even when they're done blooming, plants put a lot of energy into those spent blooms and into those seed heads they try to create, whether it's a peony, whether it's others. So I will do the same to my Ito peonies, which you can see here. So the Ito peonies, look at these big seed heads they put on. That takes a lot of energy for the plant. So I come back sometimes just right here to this leaf spot. I like to go a little deeper and go one more usually and just nip that off. Now remember, Ito peonies and these herbaceous peonies, like the one I was just nipping on, they're gonna die back to the ground. So these will both go back to the ground over the coming winter. And so you don't have to worry too much about that. This is just really helping it breathe a little bit better, helping it not put so much work into all these heavy seed heads. And honestly, sometimes these get so big and so heavy, they really kind of weight down the shrub itself. And you can tell it really takes a toll on the shrub itself. It can start looking a little stressed in certain spots. It's having to use water in those areas. And so I just think it's one of those things that makes a big difference sometimes. And I'll admit, it's a time-consuming thing. So some years it may feel like you don't have time to do it. But on those years where I have time and maybe a nice evening I can come out and do this, it's one of those nice garden tasks that just you spend a little bit of time doing and it helps. That's what I'm working on. So I'm going to finish up here on a few of them and we'll kind of do a few more. I've trimmed on most of my peonies now. You can see it just gives you some nice debris for a compost pile. Any green material that's not a weed, I'm going to add to my compost pile. Let it just sit there and work in the compost, and that's kind of the best part. So I now want to, this is kind of the day I think I've decided it's just a maintenance day. It's a day just to fill in all those small jobs. So I have this blue star fern, and you can see, you guys have seen before, I try to be really honest with plants. Some of them usually look really good, but then sometimes we get to a point with plants where they're just a little bit tired, a little bit stressed, and that's what's going on here. So I have not repotted this in a few years. So it goes into my plant room over the winter and it comes out and goes in my back patio over the summer. Spring, summer, fall, the growing months, and usually does really well. But you can see it's a little bit not looking too good. So blue star ferns, what's kind of interesting about them is one, they have that gorgeous silvery blue foliage. That is, to me, just unsurpassed. But you can see here their rhizomes kind of sit on top and they can kind of start heaving out. And when they get really tight in there, like all of these, they start wanting to break off, which is what this one's doing. And they're starting not to really do well. So they're heaving, they're growing over each other. And really what needs to happen here is they need to be reset. So what I'm gonna do is repot this. And when one falls off like this, first thing, I mean, how bizarre how they grow. Isn't that cool? Plants to me are just amazing. I'm gonna save this though, because I do wanna plant it. This doesn't mean it's bad that it broke off. It just means that it's kind of crying for help in here. So I wanna do the same pot, and I don't think it's actually really overgrown in that pot, but what I might need to do is look for some type of like shovel. I have a small trowel up here. So my gator, it becomes my roving everything. It's my carry-all for anything I need. It has my tools and it has everything. So you kind of always need to have something around. So I'm gonna use a trowel here and just kind of coax this out and kind of see what's going on. Sometimes that's what we have to do. And you know, when we do it, don't be scared of killing your plant. That's what happens, is you just need to sometimes give them a little bit of tough love. So when I'm pulling it out, I'm looking around and you can see its roots over here, even though you don't see them because they're really dark. See how they're really intricate and tight there? So you can see it really, look how tight that is. It really had been growing quite a bit. So I really want to kind of break that up, and I'm just going to give it a really nice fresh start. That's sometimes what we need. And when I'm going in here, I'm noticing, see down here, there's root right there. So it's getting really big, nice, heavy roots. It's completely fine. It just is a little heavy, and it just needs to be repotted and give some extra love. So that's what I'm gonna do here. Sometimes with these, as they get really tight in there, they kind of start wanting to get a little fragile. And so that's what we're gonna work on here, is just kind of breaking up those roots. I'm gonna treat it really like, pretend I just bought this and need to give it, you know, a fresh new planting. So when some of the leaves look really bad, I will go in and I'll just break those off, some of the ones that look really bad. I'll add those to my compost here. if you notice that soil I'm taking off of here, the pine soil, I'm also putting into my compost bin. So even though it's spent soil, it's been in a container for a long time, it to me is great just to add to your compost pile. It's not that I like to add a lot of it, but just if there's some remnants that are falling off, to me that works really well in there. So I'm going through and just cleaning it up, breaking off some of these leaves that just look extra bad, extra brown. And the reason I'm doing that is plants sometimes need stimulation. So when we're taking off some of these leaves, what we're doing is encouraging the plant to put out new ones. We're saying, hey, we're gonna take away some of yours. You can put out more now. And you can see already down here, there's fronds wanting to come out. So see how they unfurl as they grow? That's really the fun part here. So what we're doing is we're taking them off and giving this more room now to grow. And so we'll get more air circulation down in there. We'll get light. And that to me is really what sometimes just sets a plant off and gives it a whole new chapter, is just to kind of just clean it up. So I of course have, and I wanna check here, what we're doing size-wise and how we're gonna fit this in here. Honestly, you can see I have a little bit of soil left in there, and I want it to be not too much deeper because all these eyes that are on here, that's where all those fronds can come out. So we don't want to bury this too deep because that could cause a lot of rot. You really want to make sure you don't put plants in way too deep, because when you do that, they really tend to want to rot and they can fester disease. So keeping them at the right level, slightly higher than a lot of times we think, that makes a big difference in plants. So I have it set in there. I really like how it looks. And now I just want to, I left my Biotone over there and I really want to put some in there. So I'm gonna go grab it and we'll start this up. So I got my Biotone. You know, when it comes to a new plant, I just think again, since I kind of uprooted it, kind of broke up those roots, I think it's always good to add something that's gonna stimulate them. So that's what this is gonna do. And I'm just gonna add it all around so it works down in. Now, the one thing with any of these tones is a lot of them can work in different ways, but they all are beneficial, and that's the best part. So I'm sprinkling this around, and now I'm gonna put the soil right on top of it. So I use just an organic, all-purpose potting soil for everything I plant. I even, there are special soils, and sometimes I do use like the cactus or succulent mixes, but a lot of times I'll still just use the all-purpose, and it works really well. So I'm putting this all the way around. The big thing to me with any soil you use is to know the plant you're planting and the water and care that you need to give it. So things like a blue star fern, obviously when it's outside, I'm not gonna put it directly in the sun outside. I'm gonna put it in a shaded area. So it's on my patio on the north side. It gets a lot of bright light, but no direct sun. And it also then over there stays a little bit cooler for it. And I can watch it so I can make sure it stays somewhat moist. They don't wanna stay too dry, but they wanna dry out slightly in between waterings. Not too many things, unless they're a water plant, want to stay really wet all the time. So what I'm doing is making sure I work the soil in there. I want any of those air bubbles out, which will also, be pushed out when we water it. Now, I have a little bit of soil on there, so I'm going to make sure to wipe off the soil off some of those rhizomes that are sticking out. And now remember, I have this one. Now, I can do two things with this. I could pot this up in its own container by itself, and I've done that, and that's why I have 3 or 4 of these blue star ferns. Or I could just pot this right back up in here, which is what I'm gonna do. More because sometimes we just get too many plants, and it's just better for me sometimes just to leave a plant as is, and I just don't need another new one. So I'm gonna take off a leaf that doesn't look too good. But you can see with these roots, with Blue Star, you wanna have it so their eyes are just poking out, but have soil up around them. So I'm gonna make sure I plant that in there, stick it in, and you know what? The leaves will make it a little top heavy, so I'll probably have to brace it and maybe put a stake in it and just tie it up to make sure. So this just needs water, along with all my flax. I meant phlox. We planted phlox, although I do like flaxseed. I use it in my smoothies, so that's good too. So this is now planted, and now I can just water everything and feel a little bit better about this having a little bit more room to grow. It's one of those things where all throughout the summer and the growing season, I'm looking at the plants that I keep over the winter in my plant room, and I'm thinking, what maintenance might they need? When do they need to be repotted? Especially because the winter months can be hard on them. They go into a different environment. It's not ideal, but they do well, so they sometimes just need a little bit of help to make sure that they have more room to grow, that they have all their dead leaves taken away, things like that. So I'm continually looking around and thinking, what can I do that with? So I'm going to water, but what I hope you get out of this is Gardening has to work for you. And the thing is, it has to be fun. If it's not fun, it's gonna feel like work. And that's not what it should be. Gardening should be your reprieve. It should be your little time away, a little bit of therapy. So I take these little tasks, whether it's planting some new flowers to find a bloom at this exact time. Now I know every year my phlox will be beautiful at this time of year. Or whether it's just trimming off your peonies, thinking you're giving them a little bit healthier start because that's really what you're doing, or repotting something. It all can work together to make you feel better, but also make your garden feel better. And that's really what we're doing here. So I'm gonna water. As always, thanks for watching. Share this video around. It helps me a lot, but it helps everyone else see gardening's doable. If I can do it here in Southeast Iowa, anybody can do it. I'm gonna go water. I hope you do too.